The tales of Greek mythology tell of heroic voyages across the Aegean Sea. We know that the Apostle Paul sailed those waters too. And so when my daughter and I had the opportunity to set out on our tour of biblical sites in Greece last fall, we were excited to embark on our own nautical odyssey. But I'll admit that our experience was far safer, a bit more comfortable than what ancient travelers experienced. We were basically on a floating city with enough staterooms to accommodate over 2,000 passengers, 12 decks, luxurious dining rooms, a massive theater, and the crew has high-tech radar and navigation equipment to chart our course with great precision. I mean, they even switched around our stops in our itinerary at one point to avoid a passing rainstorm. Right? That's pretty nice. Now you compare that to ancient times, the merchant ships of the first century were tiny by comparison. We found a model of one on display in a maritime museum on the island of Mykonos, and even with the most experienced captain, you have to imagine that every trip was risky. I mean, stormy skies and open water would leave you sailing blind. And one bad decision could lead you far off course. Now that may explain why Paul traveled by land whenever he could. We learned in Acts 16 that after receiving his Macedonian call in a vision, maybe I should have shown a map earlier to show you some of these places, but he sailed from Troas in what we now call Turkey, then it was the Roman province of Asia, and he crossed over to Philippi up in Macedonia. Chapter 17 of Acts tells us that he then traveled by road to Thessalonica and then on to Berea. But remember, the Jews from Thessalonica came and were pursuing him even in Berea, and so he was taken south by boat to Athens, which is down in the Roman province called Achaia. You'll hear these terms as we read our passage today. And so as we embark then on chapter 18 of Acts, Paul makes the 50-mile trek over to Corinth, which serves as the provincial capital of Achaia. So with its location there, it's on this narrow isthmus of land between the Ionian Sea to the west and the Aegean to the east. Corinth was a major commercial center. To avoid the danger of open waters farther south, ships could actually be towed roughly the 4-mile pathway of rolling logs across the land there at that narrow spot. And so as you can imagine, with all that traffic of people coming and going, it kind of developed a reputation as a city. They were known for their immorality. One ancient Greek geographer named Strabo says that the temple of Aphrodite up on the hill above the city, the Acrocorinth, had 1,000 prostitutes. Now, modern scholars doubt the accuracy of that claim. They think it's false news. There was just a put down. But Paul's first letter to the Corinthians does show that believers there struggled with questions of sexual morality. The church there was also beset by division, conflicts, and false teaching. And so we see that Paul writes to them more than to any other church. He writes 2 letters with a total of 29 chapters. That makes up about 8% of the New Testament, just written to the believers in this one town. Now, you would think that Luke would have a lot to say in Acts about Paul's first visit to Corinth that lasts at least 18 months. But he sums it up, that whole stay, in just 18 verses. And to be honest, they don't tell us much about the church. So we have to step back and again ask, what is Luke's purpose? And as I've been arguing, I think he's trying to equip believers to spread the faith. He's not given us all the historical background that we might want to know. That's not his purpose. And so in Acts 18, and we're going to go all the way down through verse 23, I think he highlights 4 practical decisions that we all have to make as we seek to fulfill Christ's mission. Right now, let's be honest, every day we make practical decisions. And for a lot of those, there's no explicit biblical command to tell us what to do. It doesn't work that way. There may not be a clear right and wrong option for every decision. But the reality is it's like being out at sea. Those decisions still have a bearing on the direction of your life and ministry. And so we need to make them with that mission in mind, particularly in those hectic moments when we're beset by the storms of life. And so thinking through some examples like we have here in Acts 18, I think doing that will keep us from navigating blindly.